also, I'm having a brain fart now, but the guitar player for the Sex Pistols.
Mick Jones.
Mick Jones.
Not Mick Jones.
He had one.
Is it Mick Jones?
Steve Jones.
Steve Jones. Yeah, Mick Jones is foreigner.
Those are the only two that I had ever seen with a badass one. But dude, I mean, and they were fast, but melodic. And this guy could sing. Like he sounded like a choir boy. Like he sounded like the sound coming out of this guy's mouth didn't fit his profile, you know, and he wasn't as heavy set as he eventually got, but I mean, but they were just, and the crowd was loving it.
Yeah.
I'm sure we weren't hip enough to be there for them, but there were plenty of people there that were probably there to see that. And I'm sure they brought people from New York because at that time, you know, all those bands travel. I'm sure there were guys from Sick of It All or the Bouncing Souls or something, because it was close enough where they used to support each other like that, and they'd go.
But there weren't that many people there when they started their set.
You're right. So
I felt like we were almost standing there alone, and it was like, are we the only ones seeing this? Yeah. Like, hello.
There were people at the bar, which was kind of like separate. The stage and the floor were like through a door separate from the bar. Yeah. But I just remember that night was fantastic. And I remember they played pretty much that album, No Reward, in its entirety.
Yeah.
I don't know if it probably didn't go song for song in the same order, but I remember when they played One Love. I remember when they played No Reward, Guy Like Me, and in the middle of Guy Like Me, he's doing the I'm gonna be a movie star. You know, I mean, it was my wife's looking at me because I'm singing, so or trying to sing. But and after that, we did catch them anytime. We never saw them in New York. We kind of went over that last week, which is really weird. But I know we saw them I think the next time we saw them was at the Sting. With a very odd, but at the time, and it made sense because after like the Mighty BOSSTONES helped them out big time because they helped out a lot of bands big time. At that time, when Black Train Jack was starting out, that's when the Bouncing Souls and all these, you know, some of these other bands from New York and New Jersey were first starting off, and the BOSSTONES were already pretty big. That what was the album?
Devil's Night Out.
It was the album. No. At that point, it was the third album. It was the one that was on the major record label. It was the one with Don't Know How to Party. That was.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So you already had Devil's Night Out, More Noise and Other Disturbances, which were on Tang, and then this was their first major label on Mercury. It was on Mercury Records.
Wow.
And it had Don't Know How to Party. I think they did a cover of like Simmer Down and whatnot, but they were when we saw them at this thing, that was the headlining band.
Yeah.
And there was another band opening up that we both had already seen before with the BOSSTONES, and they were from Connecticut. And they're really good. And I still like them, you know, Spring Hill Jack, you know, really cool guys, a different type of ska than the BOSSTONES. The BOSSTONES were more heavier. They had the heavier guitars. They were louder. They had, but Spring Hill Jack were the more uppier. I don't know if that's a word, but they were like a brighter sound.
They were more upbeat.
You know? Upbeat, yes.
And that made that bill make sense because you had the BOSSTONES playing, for lack of a better term, heavy ska, punk rock ska, right? Spring Heel Jack was a little bit more traditional. You know, a song like Freedom, you can imagine someone like Laurel Aiken doing, right? So really old school, you know, oh God, what's that record label? I forget what it is, but you know, the ska record label, you know, coming right out of
Moons, the one where all those bands from the 90s were on?
No. So this was
the other one.
The 60s.
Yeah, with Lee Scratch Perry and all those.
Yeah.
What the heck was and the Scatolites and all those. Yeah.
Exactly. So they were more in that traditional ska vein, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Black Train Jack that, has a similar guitar tone, if you will, to the BOSSTONES, right? It made perfect sense if you remember that scene from that time. And it wasn't out of place. You just said, this makes perfect sense for these guys to all be playing together. But you had enough diversity on the bill for it to be something for everyone.
Yep. And that, seeing them at the Sting was different than seeing them at the Boiler Room, most obviously because of the sound system at the PA system and everything at the Sting. You had major label groups that would play at the Sting, so they had a better sound system. So seeing them there was a bigger crowd, and it was with the BOSSTONES. So the BOSSTONES at that point,
they're draw.
If they were just, that's when the BOSSTONES were starting. They hadn't become what they eventually became once they were they're on Clueless and all that stuff, but they were pretty big. They were
90210.
Yeah, they were already starting to, going to a BOSSTONES show and not having it being packed. Those days were gone at that point. Even if it was I think we saw that show in the middle of the week too.
Yeah,
we were both college aged at that time, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. But so there was a bigger crowd, and I remember that there was a good reception for Black Train Jack, and we were hooked, man. I mean, I know that that was the band that we kind of, we were friends and stuff already, but that was the band that we kind of bonded over. That was our band.
Our band.
There were some of our other friends or people we knew that we didn't hang out with all the time, like the Toby Hamps and whatnot, like them. And he was at those shows, but out of our group of friends, none of them liked that type of, not very many of them liked that type of music, like the Aaron Hartmans and Skips and the people that we hung out with, the Dave Rohdes of the world, Jay Golax. They didn't like that.
No,
that was our thing.
That was
our thing.
It's funny, but there's another person. So I remember, we saw the BOSSTONES at maybe a ska festival. I don't know, because they had Hardcore Fest, they had ska fests, and we went with Jimmy.
Yes.
And Jimmy was so mad at Dickie. Do you remember this? So
it's funny because I saw Jimmy at work yesterday. He had an appointment at the dental clinic, and I saw him. I hadn't seen him in 2 years, so I just was catching up, and I told him that I was going to be doing this with you tonight. So he said to say what's up.
Oh, that's awesome.
He was mad at Dickie. He was mad at the. Why was he mad at Dickie?
So I think that Jimmy was straight edge, and he had his skateboard with him, and Dickie was trashed, right? Anyone who doesn't know the BOSSTONES, and I don't know how unless you're living under a rock, but Dickie already sounds like this. And he's trashed on top of it, right? And Jimmy's just so pissed off at I'm going to hit this guy with my skateboard, And he wanted to nail him in the head with the skateboard because Dickie was just out of control. And I think it was at the tune-in. I forget, but
yeah, it had to have been at the tune-in if Jimmy had his skateboard.
He was so mad at Dickie. I hate this guy. Yeah, I'm going to kill him. It was awesome. And I kind of wished he had done it, just to see what would happen if he just nailed Dickie Barrett with a skateboard. It would have been amazing. But yeah, we saw the BOSSTONES a bunch of times too. But we're talking about the ska. I think that there's a band, and I played them recently for my kids. So what's nice about modern technology is that you can think of a song, and more often than not, you can find it. Now, some of the stuff that we listen to, harder to find than others. Eventually, it'll catch up, because even those indie record labels, they want to have full distribution of their stuff, and it's easy enough to push it out on the streaming platforms. But there was a band that came up that I think you saw maybe at Central with Big Mistake. Thumper. Did you see Thumper with Big Mistake?
Yeah, Thumper from upstate New York.
Yeah.
I think they're from upstate New York. Yeah. And they were another band that was really big And it's weird because, you know, at the time in the 90s, and again, it's based on where I'm sure the Midwest have their bands. The West, you know, the West Coast have their bands, but at least to me, I don't know if I'm not going to speak for you, but to me, the center of the ska world at that time revolved around the Northeast.
Absolutely.
There was just a huge, huge scene, you know, between the BOSSTONES, between Spring Heeled Jack. You had all the other ska bands from Boston had such a huge ska scene.
Yep.
Bim Scala Bim, Steady Ernest, the Allstonians. Then you had upstate New York, had Thumper. There was another band I think called Jiker that was from Connecticut. Then you had
JC SUPERSKA.
JC SUPERSKA. My buddy, my brother Pete Mia, my brother from another mother Pete Mia. Those guys were actually a band before Spring Heeled Jack.
Yep.
Spring Heeled Jack got bigger, but JC SUPERSKA was one of the first bands, ska bands in Connecticut that were touring around, you know, the Northeast. And Northeast, I'm saying, you know, they went as far. They play New York. They play. I think the furthest they went was Penn State.
Okay.
You know, they went down to the Mid-Atlantic, but they, you know, then you had all the ska band. You had the ska bands from New York, like the Toasters and Memphis Ska Police, who I'm representing.
That's right. That's right.
Great ska band that are still killing it. You know, they're still doing it, and it's fantastic. But my friend Pete was a year behind us in school. He graduated in '93, and that band formed while they were in high school. That had Pete Wazalewski, who went on to be in Spring Heeled Jack
and the BOSSTONES.
Now, you know, the BOSSTONES, and he's, you know, still doing it with Less Than Jake. I mean, he's been in Less Than Jake for almost 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you had
shout out to Sheehan High School.
Yeah. And then you had you had Anthony Razamondo, who, you know, was in a band in Boston with Ken Cook called what was the name of the band? I don't remember the name of the band, but they were really, really good. And I enjoyed them a lot. And Mike Woods was another guy who, the bass player, who ended up in Boston. JC SUPERSKA disbanded because all these guys went on to Boston to either go to college or pursue the Damn Personals. That's the band.
Oh my gosh.
Ken Cook and Anthony Razamondo. Such a good band. And not ska. They weren't a ska band.
No.
Like, they weren't emo. They were kind of like, they were heavier, but melodic. And
I'm going to have to look.
Albums.
I'm going to have to look that up because you just dropped 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon on me, because I am fairly certain that the lead singer / guitar player for the Damn Personals went
on to the Libertines. He was in the Libertines. That's Anthony Razamondo. And then he did the album, the song for A Star Is Born.
Oh my gosh. I think I hung out with him.
Yeah.
With another friend of mine up here in Boston.
Yep.
Holy cow, that is really bringing back a flood of memories.
Anthony Razamondo, for people who don't know, his father was the music teacher at Sheehan. He was one of the music teachers at Sheehan or Lyman Hall. He went to Hamden High. He lived in Hamden, so he went to Hamden High. This dude was a ridiculous musician. He was primarily a trumpet player for JC SUPERSKA, but he could play piano, bass, whatever, guitar. Played guitar in the Damn Personals, like Jay was saying, like you were saying, but he ended up moving to England and replacing Pete whatever from Libertines. What was the